and welcome to this new Taixtile podcast episode. It's been a while since we've been here. It's been a year, I think. We took a break, because private life took over at some point. But now we're back and we're trying to get it out more regularly, but of course we can't promise anything. Yeah, how are you?
I'm great.
How was your last year crafting-wise? Like knitting-wise, for example.
Oh, actually, until November, I think not that great because I stopped knitting, I think, in January
Why is that?
because I had this project, this temperature sweater, which I have talked about.
You didn't bring it, did you?
No,
Okay.
because it's still in the same state as the last time we spoke about it. And it's a challenging project, and I don't have always the mind space to work on multiple challenging projects. And knitting is currently for me a project or
A craft.
a craft, which I do to relax and to calm down. And if I have to calculate every single stitch I do or think about whatever I have to do next every couple minutes, I don't do that. And
Understandable.
on the other hand, I always thought I have to finish this project. I have to finish. It's already 3 years old now.
What year is the temperature gradient?
2022.
Okay.
2020. 2020.
2020. Okay.
Yeah, so it's already 4 years back.
Isn't it 2021?
Yeah, it's 2021.
Because we didn't even know each other in 2020.
Yeah.
And I remember that you talked about it a bit later on.
I already make this project more draining than it is.
But it's okay. It's fine. And as I told you before, sometimes it's okay to leave projects as they are. Sometimes you don't have to finish anything when it doesn't give you joy. So sometimes it's good to get remotivated about a craft by starting something new. Of course, it's not great to
do it always.
to always do it this way, but sometimes it can help. So.
Yeah, and that's actually, we talked about that, and that's why I started knitting again, and I knitted this cardigan. That was in November when was it November? Maybe September, October, somewhere around that time that I started knitting again, because...
So let's open this category of our finished projects. So we haven't said that before, but this episode will be about vintage knitting projects. And so we're going to show you what we made this last year, so 2024, and what we will be working on in this coming year. Yeah. So I was looking for more vintage-inspired knitting projects, and I've knit a few projects from original vintage patterns, but I wanted to try out something different. So there is one knitting designer who makes a lot of vintage-inspired knitting patterns, and she calls herself Squidney Knits on Instagram. I think her real name is Sydney, and she makes very interesting patterns because you can make them for your size. So actually you don't have to choose size S, M, or L, but you have a sheet where you put your own measurements in, and then you calculate how many stitches you need for each individual measurement, depending on your own gauge. So this is really cool as well, that you can choose your own yarn. You don't have to stick to one of the given yarns in the pattern. So I made this cardigan here, which is called the Rose Street cardigan. And I also used a yarn from Holst, which is the Holst Super Soft, which I tried out for the first time and I love it. It has about 80 colors, I think. So it's really great if you want to get a wide variety of different colors for your projects, for fair owl projects, for example. So yeah, I knit this bottom up. The top part is knit in one piece, so it's basically knit in the round, but because it's a cardigan, you knit it flat. So, but the front and the back are one piece. And then the sleeves are knit in the round separately, and then you sew them on in the end. And there's a really cool trick in the pattern how to have these puffed sleeve shoulders that have a really nice curve to it. So my problem with old examples of vintage knitting patterns was that I had more room in the sleeve, so I had to make pleats in here, but they never looked really good. So this pattern is great if you want to know how to achieve this kind of shoulder shaping. So yeah, this is one of my favorite cardigans that I ever made. It's one of my favorite garments. I've worn it tons this last year, and I think it looks really flattering on you.
That's why I started knitting it.
Yeah. So maybe you want to talk about your project?
Yeah. So I, for the base shape, I also used the same pattern, just with my measurements. But I somehow had the urge to use another lace pattern than it is in the instructions. You have the original lace pattern, it's only in the sleeves. And I saw a lace stripe. And that's why I have it set in here in sleeves and also in the front and the back. You can't see that, but I will show you.
Where did you get the pattern for? Did you make it yourself?
No, I saw an image on Pinterest with Russian instructions, so Cyrillic writing.
Yeah.
And I asked ChatGPT to translate it for me. And
it worked.
It worked. It worked perfectly. I mean, I also know the basic schematics of knitting patterns, but I was, for example, there was one up where I wasn't sure, which was knitting 3 together, which I haven't seen in that form before.
Is it like a center decrease?
Yeah. And I haven't seen this symbol for it ever before, so I wasn't sure what it really should be. And so I probably would have understood it without ChatGPT, but I tried it anyways because I was curious mostly. I wanted to know if it works or not, and it did. So so if you have images of patterns you can't read because whatever language it is a nice way to get at least an understanding of it. And yeah, so the only thing I don't like about my cardigan is that the lace stripes in the back are that much to the side because they match here at the shoulders. They don't actually match because here's the ribbing, but if you would have them, or if I had knitted them the whole way around, they would match on the shoulder seam. And therefore, they end up almost under my arm on the back side. And if I would reknit it, I would place the back lace more to the center. But that is something I could have probably, if I had sketched it with each stitch, I could have seen it up front, but I didn't, so I have to live it with that.
But that's also a bit of a problem with vintage patterns and vintage inspired patterns, is that they start from the bottom up, so you can't really try them on, which is different for most modern, not most, but a lot of modern patterns where you knit from the top down.
Yeah,
so
that's true. On the other hand, you know already if the waist fits or not.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, but other than that, I'm really pleased. I used the same yarn. It's also a Holst yarn. It's a different color, obviously.
They look really nice together as well.
Yeah.
Mine is really used. You see that it has been worn a lot.
Mine not yet, because I finished it at the beginning of December, so I hadn't that much time to wear it yet. But I will definitely.
Yeah. How did you like the yarn? Did you use it for the first time ever, or?
Yes, but I know the yarn because my mother used it for making a huge shawl with double-faced knitting,
Mhm.
and I know how soft it is. And
It's
knitting,
not that soft.
it's not soft.
The name suggests that it's soft, but it's actually quite hard, I think. I feel.
While knitting?
When knitting,
Yeah.
sometimes I really had a marking on my finger where I was holding the tension, and it was really deep, cutting deep
Yeah.
into my finger.
Yeah.
Because it's, but I think it's depending on the color shade, because I have other yarns from this yarn, and the blue one really was very hard and, how do you say that? Yeah, it was really not that pleasant to knit with, especially for a longer period of time. But I think it floofens up when washing, and then it
Yeah.
becomes rather soft. But still, if you're very sensitive to wool, then I don't think this would be a nice yarn for you, because
Yeah.
it's not a superwash yarn or anything. So it's not even merino wool,
That's
I think.
true. I also wouldn't wear this cardigan without a top or t-shirt underneath.
Mm.
Because on your arms, I think it's okay if it scratches a little bit, but I wouldn't like it on my stomach, for example. The whole body, for the whole body, it would be too scratchy. But as a cardigan, you usually have something underneath, a blouse or something, and then I don't mind. I'm not that sensitive to wool, but I guess someone who is wouldn't like it.
Yeah. So these are our two projects from the same pattern. So I've a few other projects that are based on this pattern. So it's a great base pattern that you can make your own designs based on this one. Yeah. So maybe we'll continue with that.
Sure.
So one of these is this sweater here. It's also because I fell in love with this hot super soft yarn. So it was the first time for me trying it out, and then I just bought more of this yarn. So I bought a whole cone of this green colored yarn. And yeah, I had a knitting pattern in mind with a cable pattern and a moss stitch pattern, which was inspired by one stitch pattern that I saw in a vintage knitting book. I'll insert the name in here. Yeah, it's also knit from the bottom up with increases at the sides. The sleeves are knit separately in the round, and then I sewed everything up, and then I knit on this round turtleneck. I think with this one, the puffy sleeves don't look as good as with this cardigan, because the sleeves are quite narrow. So I feel there's not much room to have a puffed sleeve in here, because it's quite narrow on my sleeve, and then there's like a little puff in here, and it looks not as good as with this one. I don't know why, other than that the sleeves are too narrow. Maybe I will try it the next time. Yeah, but other than that, it was also really fun to knit. The body part most of the time goes really fast for me, because it's quite mindless and I can do it wherever I am, on train rides or something. Yeah, I like to wear it, but it's of course very warm, because this cardigan I wear it open most of the time, but this one is of course more of a winter garment for me.
I really love the color.
When you knit, when you wash this color, when you wash this yarn, then of course textiles get more dark when they are wet, and this has really a nice, like a sage green, but more of a dark sea green color. It's really beautiful, and in this way I like it as well, but when it's wet it looks even more beautiful.
Okay.
I'm a bit special about green tones, because there are certain greens that I really love,
Maybe
but they're not sometimes not how you see them online or how they are in real life. So.
Maybe you should wear it on the beach, always wet.
That will destroy it with the salty water. I think.
That's true. Okay, maybe at the beach of a lake.
A lake, yeah. Let's
That
see.
would be so weird. Or only when it's raining.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, is it cool?
So based on this pattern, I have another project. I've
With
been
the same
quite-
yarn.
With the same yarn. So, for this blue cardigan, as I said, I bought this super soft yarn as a cone, because as a cone, the yarn is less expensive than when you buy 50-gram balls. So I just dived in, I bought a cone. And then when I bought this yarn for the green cardigan, I also bought a cone of white, because I also like white yarn and it can be combined very easily with other yarns. And I had this idea to make a sweater based on a very popular vintage knitting pattern, which is this one here. Might have seen it before at certain places. For example, there's a TV show called Home Fires, a British TV series which plays in 1940s Britain, and there's a lot of hand knitted pieces featured in this series. For example, this one, and also Susan Crawford, which is another very famous designer of knitting patterns. She also has a version of this one in her, I think it's her newest book. So yeah, I wanted to try my own version. As a pattern, I used the original vintage pattern that I got online as a scanned version. There were a few things that I wanted to improve in comparison to the original pattern. So for example, what I don't like when I see a lot of versions is that there's a clear cut. So normally you have this blue color and then you start with another color for this moss stitch pattern, which I don't really find very beautiful. So I started to knit another white stripes in the chevron pattern and then start the moss stitch pattern so that it would be more subtle, the exchange of color. What I also did is you have these lines here of knit stitches, and I like that they are from the ribbing, these go directly into this line of knit stitches. So this pattern is knit in a way which is also different from the original, I think. That I have my waist size, which is in this ribbing, and then I increase in here, in this line, to have my bust measurement. So I don't have any increases at the sides, which would also look a bit weird when you're increasing in this kind of pattern. So you have the increases right here already, and then you just knit straight up. So I liked to increase in a way that you still have these lines going up. Yeah. These are the kind of things. And also for the sleeves, I used the same method as with this cardigan here. So what I really took from the original vintage pattern is just the chevron pattern, and the rest was made to my own measurements, because in the end, most vintage knitting patterns don't fit me when they're not graded. So I will have in one way or another adapted to my size. So yeah, that's what I did. And I really love the color combination of blue and white. It's a classic, but yeah.
Definitely. It's a really bright, summery look.
Yeah, the shorter sleeves. I mean, it's still wool, so it's not for the hottest weather, but for springtime, for example.
You were quite effective in knitting. You did a lot.
I did a lot. For me, it's a way to feel productive when just still sitting on the sofa and knitting, or when having a lot of train rides, as I do for my job. So that's really a way for me to relax.
Yeah. Really nice.
And this pattern is a great way to have scraps, to use scraps. You could also use it for 3 colors.
Yeah, true. And this is also why I will probably knit the sweater one day, because I also bought the cone for this green and white. So I have enough yarn to make this one too.
It's a 500-gram cone, so
yeah.
How much do you have left? Do you know?
Half of it, so 250 grams.
Well, you could make another one.
Yeah, I could make another one. I most definitely could make another one, because this one has the sleeves are a little bit too long. So even if it would be a little bit tight, it would work out. I just would have to shorten the sleeves.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have the same cardigan twice.
No.
That would
There's
be
no sense in that.
yes, I could adjust the lace in the back, but then I wouldn't wear this one anymore. And that why? Then I prefer making a jumper like that, or we will see.
But I still have quite a lot of this blue left, so I made another small project from this blue yarn, which is a beret, and this one, and I've still quite a lot left. So
Okay, so you can make one with long sleeves of this, a chevron.
I could, yeah, but then it's the same problem. I wouldn't wear this one.
True.
The problems you have. Yeah, maybe one day I'll combine it with another blue. Or maybe if you have some ideas, then let us know what we could do with, I think it's maybe 100 grams of yarn.
I don't know, how much do you usually use for a small scarf? These vintage neckties?
I don't think you use 100 grams.
Yeah, it's not that much.
We'll see. So yeah, that's it for me for bigger garments as projects that I finished last year. So what have you knit this last year too?
Nothing big. Just small. But I wanted to have a head piece, so a hat, or is there a different word for Mütze than hat?
Mütze. Nee.
Okay, then
a beanie.
Yeah, right. But I didn't want to make a beanie. I wanted to have something vintage. So I tried knitting berets or otems, or however they are called in different regions. And I started with this Fair Isle one, and it ended up being way too small.
I think you showed this one in the
That's possible.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you try to stretch it out?
Yes, but I felt like the yarn started to break. I could feel it.
Wow.
So I stopped that. Then I knitted another one with the pattern. The pattern itself is called beret number 3.
Creative.
But I don't know the designer right now, but we will insert it. And beret number 3 was the one where the whole design should be felted after knitting. So I did that, and it shrank. It shrank so much that's now really, really tiny. And I was so frustrated because I really loved it, and then it ended up that small. And I also tried to stretch it, and then I broke the yarn. That's why I stretched apparently quite a bit, so it's not that strange that I felt like the other one would break too. So I did it too much for this one. So I decided I could use it as kind of a fascinator. Maybe I would add some lace someday, so like when you have it over your face with some fascinator, but overall I wasn't that pleased with it. So I re-knitted it once again. This time I felted it by hand, and I knitted it bigger, because with this one I already felt in the not felted version that it was a little bit too small for me. So I knitted the bigger version. I think there are 3 versions, or 2, small and big, and I now knitted the bigger one. And this one is, from the circumference, okay, but the inner part is too wide. The opening is too wide for my head. It doesn't sit right. So I always have to, it doesn't look like a classical beret should sit. So it's decent. I can wear it. I like it, but it could be better. I could do it better.
But that's something that could be easily fixed.
Yeah, I could either knit another a couple of stitches from the inside out. But I thought I will start with another knitting project first.
What yarn did you use for this?
It's the drops yarn. It's called Floral or Flora. Flora. And it felt quite good. So you shouldn't wash it too hot. But for this felting project, I think it's really good.
Because when you say you want to start another beret pattern, when you use another yarn, then it might behave quite differently to this one.
Yeah.
So the felting might be different as well.
Would use the same pattern, but start with a smaller circumference and make it bigger until I start decreasing again. That would be the idea. And not using another pattern. I don't think I will have to buy another beret pattern unless I want something really special, because what you do is always the same. You start with a couple of stitches, increase, then decrease.
Yeah.
And how you do it, you can make special designs in how you decrease or whatever comes up to one's mind, especially making a fair isle or something. But the general shape stays the same.
Yeah.
So I would have to improve the shape for my special likings. And once I have that, I can go on with it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I tried something vintage looking, so I can wear it with the cardigan.
You can make a green one.
That's the next step.
Great.
That's the next beret I will knit, a green one.
It would be interesting how this yarn felt, the whole super soft yarn.
Yeah, that's true. It feels already very while knitting, the drops yarn feels very different than the holst. So I'm pretty sure it will felt differently, but we have to test that.
It's about fine also.
Yeah.
The holst yarn. So it's an experiment.
Yeah.
That's great to have enough yarn to try it out a few times if it doesn't work out the first time.
That's true. And that maybe would be a good thing. I mean, I could knit possibly. How much did I use for this? I think you have 30 grams of this yarn used. So there are plenty berets I could knit with this one cone if I wanted to.
8 more berets.
Yeah. But I don't think I want to.
Why not?
I want to have one which is perfect immediately.
Okay.
The very first time.
That's a dream that hasn't come true yet, I believe, for most knitting projects. So I too have made a beret. We are very creative in choosing our knitting projects, I feel. But yeah, mine is looking like this. I used a vintage pattern, which I don't know the name of. That's really great when you're working with vintage patterns, you can't remember the names. Yeah, so mine isn't felted, so you knit it flat and then you seam it up, which I wouldn't do normally, but I just wanted to try it out because you see there's quite a little, can you see that? A point in here. And when sewing it up, I tried to gather the sewing thread a little bit to make it more rounded, but it still has this shape. But generally I haven't worn it yet because it's also quite small and the opening is quite large. And I haven't figured out a way how to, first of all, how to wear berets nicely without them falling off my head, because I always feel like they're sliding off my head. And the best way I feel is when I have it sitting like this, but then it doesn't look good. So I'll still have to figure out how to wear them best. But yeah, this was also a very nice, maybe 2-day project, using up some of the blue yarn that I still have here. Yeah, maybe I'll try to modify it to also knit up around this opening to have it more closed. You could also use a crocheting I-cord stitch maybe to make it a little bit more snug. Yeah, that's for this project. And then I have another beret that I knit because I like knitting them. I finished a big Fair Isle project at the beginning of 2024, which I will show maybe in another podcast episode. And I had a lot of yarn left, and I used for this one the Shetland Spindrift wool yarn. And I had so much left in so many different colors that I wanted to have a small Fair Isle project that would be suitable for knitting up scraps. I, for this one, used again a pattern by Squidney Knits, or she called herself like the Squid School of Knitting, I think. And it's this one. It's the Hoswick Beret, I think it's called. I didn't use the colors as they were recommended in the pattern. I had to exchange a few because, of course, I don't have every of those that I used for my Fair Isle cardigan. But yeah, this one, on the other hand, is way too big for me. So it's not the typical, it doesn't have the typical vintage shape, but it looks really wide, which makes it seem more modern. Like those kinds of berets that are more of a beanie when you wear them. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but maybe I will try to very carefully felt this just a tiny little bit to have it a bit smaller.
Do it by hand.
Yeah, I will definitely do it by hand. But you can also use, I used a plate, so there's this technique where you pull those over a plate and let them dry this way. So maybe I will use a slightly smaller plate if I have one to take control of the size it gets. That's it for finished projects for last year. Maybe I forgot something, but that's all of it that fits into this vintage 1940s knitting realm.
For me, it's actually all I have finished last year.
It's all right. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm knitting again, so I think that's a win.
What are you knitting? When we will go to what we are currently knitting.
I'm knitting, it's called the plaid jumper or the plaid jumper. I don't know how it's pronounced. It's a really pretty design I found. I think I have to start why I started knitting it, because I was at my mom's or my parents' house, and my mom dyes yarn and sells it on local markets. And when I was there, she had all her boxes out and was rearranging stuff, and I was allowed to choose some yarn. And I just fell in love with the color combination of this gray and this bright yellow. Oop. Hoppala. And both together, it's quite strong, I think,
contrast.
the contrast. But therefore, I wanted to find a design or pattern where I have mostly the gray and the yellow just as an accent color. And I found this plaid jumper, which is a 1940s pattern, where I lost some stitches. Where the base of the bodice is knitted in the gray, and then there are yellow stripes horizontally knitted, and later on embroidered. There are vertical stripes so that you get this plaid pattern. And I thought that would be the perfect design for the colors I have. And once I had finished this cardigan, I started immediately knitting this jumper. And I have already re-knitted it 3 times. As Clara said, with vintage patterns, there's one size. And if the gauge doesn't match, and the measurements, sometimes, at least for me, I have to knit it, see how it works out, and in the worst case, re-knit it. And at one point, I made a mistake because this waistband is pointed in the front middle. And for the point, one needs 2 purl stitches exactly in the middle. So one needs an uneven number of ribbing in the front. And I didn't think about it. And when I started making this point, I realized that it wouldn't work out. Then I thought about just replacing 2 stitches from the side, so then it would have worked out. But I also didn't like how I made the decreases at the sides because they were very visible. And so I decided to frog it and reknit it. And then I made a test fitting and realized that this yarn somehow is extremely stretchy.
Is it a superwash yarn?
No, shouldn't be.
Okay.
But still, it's super stretchy. So it gets... I just didn't like the texture, and I could, if I wanted, place me 2 times in it. So I can stretch it as... Yeah. So I decided, okay, I reknitted with a full number, instead of 3mm needles, with 2mm needles.
That's tiny.
Yeah. And that's why it takes now a lot more time. But the overall texture, structure of the whole textile is way better, in my opinion.
Are you using the amount of stitches that is recommended in the pattern, or did you modify it to your size?
I did modify it to my size. For once, the pattern starts with the bust measurements. And I decided I will start with my hip measurements, decrease to my waist measurements, and increase to my bust measurements again. Because there is some shaping through the waistband because it's a ribbing, and therefore it will pull in a little bit. But I wanted to make this effect stronger because I just like it better on myself. And therefore I have these increases on the sides, which aren't in the original pattern. And yeah, so
it makes it a bit more complicated.
Yeah. I already had once knitted with the yellow yarn and I really liked it, but I haven't gotten to this point now again. So probably a couple of days more and I can knit in yellow again.
Yes. It takes time. Sometimes projects just take time. You don't need to stress yourself out because of that.
But one thing which is really, it's not annoying, but strange somehow. I start knitting with a certain size of needles and already think, oh, they're really small. And then I realized, okay, I have to take even smaller needles in order to get the effect I want. I'm apparently someone who really loves tiny stitches, which take a lot of time.
But I feel like you knit very loosely compared to me because we compared our needle, our gauge and our needle size for these cardigans.
Yeah, true.
And I had quite small needles. I think I used, no, they weren't this small, but I used 3.25mm needles and I got 29 stitches. and you tried it out, and I think you had 24.
Yeah.
So there's quite a difference, and I always thought that I would knit normally, so not too loosely, not too.
Maybe you are knitting normally and I'm knitting very loose.
I don't know. Everyone's different. Everyone's knitting is different, so.
Yeah.
But maybe it would be easier to adjust the stitches, the amount of stitches, instead of going down a needle size.
Yeah, I thought about that too. But I still didn't like how the textile itself feels. On one hand, it's a really tiny difference, but I still feel that the one feels better than the other. The one with the smaller needles just feels better than the one with the.
Did you wash these? It's just tiny.
Yeah, this one I did. I don't remember if I did with this one.
But yeah, it looks quite loose.
Yeah. Ah, no, that is the very first I did with the needle size recommended in the pattern. This is the second one, and I don't know where I have the third one.
But also, it's always a way of what you want your design to be. If it's to be more of a loose sweater, more airy, then of course it's nice to have an airy fabric. But if you want a very structured and stiff garment, then it's better to have a small gauge as well.
Yeah.
But how will you embroider the vertical lines? Will you use a duplicate stitch, or will you knit between those stitches?
I have no idea yet.
Because when you will be knitting between the stitches, then you will get a more denser fabric as well. So.
But they are very far apart from each other.
Okay.
So I don't think that would have that much of an impact. But I think I will use a duplicate stitch. But I haven't decided on that yet. I will see. The pattern just says sew it on.
Sew the stitches on?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
it's nice to work with vintage patterns. You can do as you like.
So that's my current project. And I will probably have a couple of months or at least weeks to knit with it. So what are you knitting?
I'm staying within the Holst realm of yarns, but this time I'm using the Holst Coast, which is a yarn made of cotton and wool. So it has a different character than those 100% wool yarns. I used this yarn before, but only by knitting 2 strands at once, which makes a bit of a thicker yarn. But this one, when using it just with 1 strand, it's really, really fine. I think it's 350 meters for 50 gram. So it's even finer. It's a lace yarn, yeah. So I found in the beginning of this year a booklet. I have it printed out because I found it as a PDF pattern, and I love every pattern in it, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2. It's the Sunbeam Knitting Book. I think it's an Australian brand of, it's produced in Australia. It's an Australian brand of magazines. This one is from the 1930s. The sweater on the cover I love it. But I'm knitting another one, which I'm going to show you.
Isn't that on the front the same color combination as the one we knitted?
In a way, yeah. Wait a moment. It could be. This one's with chevrons. This one is with a lace stripe lace pattern. But the one that I'm making is very similar to this one, but still a little bit different. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's like this. So you have stripes in the darker color that are just a plain stock knit stitch, and the white stripes are made of a lace pattern. So in this pattern, it's suggested to use a dark blue and a white, which would also look very nice. More of a marine kind of character that it gets. But mine will be in a dark red and a white. It's more an off-white, more into going into like a gray, light gray. But what I've made so far is this.
So it's knitted in pieces?
It's knit in pieces, yeah. And I'm doing it the same way like with my chevron jumper, that I have my waist measurement for the bottom, and then I increased at the edge of the ribbing to my bust size, because until now I've made most of my jumpers in a way that I decrease at the sides regularly to get to my bust size, to my bust measurement. But I feel to get this more vintage silhouette, it's nice to have more of a slope around the hip, around the waist. So you have your waist, which is very the waist ribbing is close to your waist, and then you get kind of a sloped effect, and then you have your garment. I really like this kind of silhouette. It looks a bit more vintagey in a way, or 1930s, 1940s. And it's also what you can see here in the pattern, that you have this very close to your waist ribbing, and then it kind of slopes over here. Yeah. So as with the other pattern, I used like the base pattern repeat for my design, but I changed the size completely, because I just measured how many stitches I have. I have an Excel sheet, and then I calculate how many stripes I need to knit, how many stitches I need to have. Yeah, and this will be the back, and then there's the front and the sleeves, of course. And what I also find very interesting about this pattern, and I tried to understand it, but I didn't quite get it yet. You have this collar here, but you have kind of a braided collar. So you are knitting 2 braids or 2 stripes, and then you braid it, and I think you knit it to the collar, to your neck, by braiding them. I haven't quite understood it yet, but you will see in the future. I will see in the future. Yeah, so this is my pattern. It's very slow because it's such a fine yarn, and it feels also a bit airy, of course, because of this cotton fabric. So it's not that structured, not that like stiff, like you would have it with the superwash yarn. Yeah, I'll see how it holds up. I'm a bit skeptical. You can't use this kind of yarn by knitting one strand when you want to have a structured garment. Yeah, and I will also see how the yarns go. Well, I used how the yarns will behave when washing. I already made a swatch and washed it, and it was fine, but with a bigger piece of fabric, I'll see. Yeah.
It's always a little different. That's what I thought too with the swatch of this. The first swatch was fine. I had the gauge as indicated in the pattern. But once I had knitted the whole thing, it just felt flimsy. So the swatch was okay, but the garment not. So sometimes that happens too.
Yeah.
It's a little bit disappointing, to be honest. On the other hand, well, it's knitting, and knitting is the fun part. At least for me, I'm a process knitter, not a product knitter.
I'm a bit of both, but I also quite enjoy the process. Yeah. But to come back to the point where you said that the swatch is different to your garment, I mean, it's natural because the weight of the garment makes the whole garment behave differently than when you have a little swatch. And also when you're knitting in the round compared to when you're knitting flat, that can also make a difference in your gauge and in your stitch length. So there's quite a few factors why it becomes differently, but that's all experience. Sometimes you can deduct from your swatch how it will look in the garment and take some aspects into consideration. So that's it for our current works in progress. I think you brought some garments, or one garment from your archives.
Yeah.
So let's open the category from our archives. From the archives?
From the archives.
Yeah. What have you made?
It's also a vintagey t-shirt.
I can hold it up.
I don't remember what the pattern was called because I knitted it 2, 3, or 4 years ago, probably. Oh, I saw it on Instagram. I think her Instagram handle is Sibuko or Sibukao, who had knitted it in a different color, and I found the pattern and did
Your thing.
my thing. I used the scrap yarn I had, and that's also why the sleeves ended up really, really short, because I had to measure the rest of the yarn and take the ball, make another one from it, and see that both balls are the equal weight, so that I have 2 equal long sleeves. And yeah, it's almost it wasn't anything left apart from just enough to make little shoulder pads, which are stiffed with I think scrap yarn. Yeah, it feels like scrap yarn. Could also be some fabric, but I think it was scrap yarn, so that the puffs stand up a little more. And other than that, it was knitted in around from the bottom up, or with these holes in lace pattern, and then the bands not sewn to the sides and then threaded through. I really like it, but it's actually way too warm for summer. Because the sleeves are super short, so it's definitely from the style of it.
You could use
summer.
You could wear a cardigan over for winter.
That's true. But then I would have to knit, I think, a black one.
Or a berry colored one, like for in these darker colors.
Yeah, that's right. I don't even remember why I know why I had left this yarn, because I knitted a shrug in this color, which I never wear. But
or you can frog it and make a cardigan in the same yarn. Like a two-piece vintage two-piece set.
I think the shrug is so small I would only have the sleeves for a cardigan. Or maybe sleeves and just until the shoulder blades, the bodice.
Style. Or you could sew longer sleeves. You could remake the sleeves.
Yeah.
Or you could use stripes. But that would look a bit weird.
Yeah, a striped cardigan to just matching with this.
I mean, but you could use black stripes and then this berry color. Because black is already here, and then
yeah.
But still, I'm not sure. What do you think?
I sometimes wear it in spring or autumn when it's still warm or already warm, but not quite. But in summer, I can't wear it.
But that's what I don't understand about most vintage knitting patterns, because the sleeves are so short. For this chevron jumper, I elongated the sleeves a little bit, because for me it even looks weird to have them go to this point here.
Like a usual t-shirt.
When it ends at the widest point of your arm, then it makes you look even wider, which I don't really like. So I like jumpers when the sleeves end up here. And then it's not that cold anymore. But I don't understand. Why did you knit wool jumpers and have short sleeves? I mean, it's for saving wool, which I understand. But other than that, it's not very practical.
Yeah. It's also the only reason I can come up with, that it's to save yarn.
No.
But still, then you're cold.
And when you're wearing a wool cardigan over it, then it's too warm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really like the yarn. Looks really nice with these berry pink shaped colored colors. Yeah.
It's also really soft, and overall I really like it. It's just there's no season to properly wear it.
What pattern did you use? Do you know the name? or
bow sweater. But that's all.
interesting. We will link all the patterns that we use down below if there's an online source for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so that's from the archives. I haven't made anything vintage before. So this was my first vintage knit.
By vintage, you mean 1940s?
Yeah.
Because historical patterns you have made a lot.
True.
Projects.
True. Vintage, I mean, everything after 1910s is vintage for me. There I somehow made the cut.
Yeah. Me too.
Okay. That's good. On the same page.
Do you have anything planned as your future projects?
Oh, a lot.
That question.
Now that I'm back into knitting, I have so many projects. Shall I start with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
I have a pattern, or not a pattern. I have yarn also for my mom. 3 colors, which green and 2 berry tones, so lilac.
Mhm.
And I thought about knitting the chevron sweater with that, or a similar one which has more of a seashell
Oh, okay. Yeah.
pattern. What the pattern I found is more for scraps, and I don't have scraps. I have actual skeins, so I'm not sure if I will make something first with that and then use actually the scraps of that to make that scrapped pattern. So not sure about that. And then I have one cone of the entirely white holst yarn, where I thought about knitting. It's a modern blouse which looks a little bit vintage, or it's a t-shirt actually too.
More of a cottagecore.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
more of a cottagecore design, and a couple of berets in different colors. I will knit a Norwegian sweater for my boyfriend. And I think there are a couple of more jumpers, especially by Squid Knits, which I would like to knit.
Basically all of them.
Yeah, true.
Not all of them, but most of them.
But for those I don't have the yarn yet. For the other projects which I already mentioned, I have the yarn, so I will probably start with them, because I already have a quite big fabric stash. I don't want to have my yarn stash explode like the same way. So yeah. And I'm currently really into vintage knitting. I like the style. I like mostly the style. I think that's the main reason. So
it's nice that we are both in this bubble right now, so we can motivate each other.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
What are your coming projects?
I don't have a specific one because I'm now focused on this strap version, but I mean basically all of this.
Every single one.
Not every single one, but there I will show you maybe a few more. I won't show you the pattern, but I think I can show you the images. This one is really nice. I'm not sure if it would look good on me as well, but it's a 2-piece, so you have this blouse, blouson, maybe you can call it, which is basically just a front placket, and then you have this outer piece, and it's really 1930s, and I really like the 1930s. Yeah, so this maybe, but I'm not really sure if I would really wear it. Yeah, I mean, this one I would love to make myself as well, maybe in a cotton fabric, which makes it more for summer, suitable for summer.
And also with the lace, it might be really airy.
Yeah, but I would have to look what to wear underneath, which is also a problem with this one, because I don't like when you have very airy fabrics and then you wear a top underneath, but the top, of course, doesn't cover all of the textile that is created with your
Mm-hmm.
knitted piece. So sometimes you have like another color peeking out underneath, then you have your skin peeking out, so it's different colors under this one. So
maybe you could sew undergarment, jersey undergarment, which has these measurements, or at least similar, so you could wear it with different jumpers in that style, so that you have all the areas covered so that the colors match.
Yeah, that would be an idea, but then it's too warm, maybe. Depending on the kind of, when you're using a cotton jersey fabric underneath this, then it wouldn't really be a very summery garment anymore.
Should be silk.
Yeah, only the best. The most expensive. But that would be an idea. Or maybe you could use a flesh-toned top underneath.
Yeah,
but then it would look like you wouldn't wear anything underneath. I'm not sure. Let's see.
What is she wearing underneath? You can't see it at all, right?
No. And also, it has been colored afterwards, so
true.
You don't really know. Yes, other projects. I would love to make myself a land girl's outfit one day.
Ooh.
So I really like these trousers that are really wide at your hips, and maybe I'd make a green color, maybe in this type of green, maybe a bit more into a bluish tone color. I would love to make myself a land girl's sweater. Yeah, but other than that, I don't really have anything planned.
Okay.
So I think this was it for this episode. Yeah, as I said, we will try to get it out more regularly, but of course we're working, we're having a life, so I'm not really sure how long it would take. But yeah, it was nice to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we do.
Yeah.
And see you soon, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.